Professor, thank you very much for joining Energy Live News. In the wake of the publication of the IPCC Sixth Assessment Report, please can you tell us your takeaways from this report? What does everyone need to know about this report? The UN Secretary General said the report is code red for the humanity. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. And I think it's been a very interesting moment because in combination with the fires and the floods that we see taking place around the planet and the very, very vivid imagery that the general public are receiving from the media on that, I think the combination of that and this extremely solid and a worrying report from the IPCC rings the death knell finally of fossil fuels. I think it will simply no longer be acceptable to be involved in the long-term generation of energy from fossil fuels, and that the 80% of energy production that we have at present from fossil fuels will rapidly decline. I imagine within the next decade, we'll see investors flee and we'll begin to see rusting, plants of oil refineries and so on, in much the same way that we saw the whaling industry collapse in the 1960s.
There are many critics out there who are saying that the report confirms that climate policies have failed. What's your take on that?
I think that's right. I think we've reached the point where three-line slogans and empty rhetoric will no longer suffice. I think the political community is now backed into a corner where it will actually have to bite the bullet and genuinely act. Nobody's going to come rushing over the horizon with a vaccine to save them in the same way that happened with COVID. This time they're going to have to confront reality and bite the bullet. And it's going to be very hard for them, but it's their test of what they will offer by way of a better future for humanity.
According to the environmental audit, the report strengthens COP President-designate Alok Sharma's hand in pressing for updated pledges for reduced nationally determined contributions. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. For him, it must be a gift because we know that he's been having difficulties with the G7 discussions a little while ago and his other kind of diplomatic attempts to bring the nations of the world on board. I think it's going to be much more difficult for those reluctant players in the game to sustain their position. And so it's going to make it much easier for him to pull off the success at COP26 in Glasgow that we're all looking for.
Is the climate change irreversible? From your point of view, what do you believe? Do people still have time to reverse the bad effects of their activities on environment? And what do you feel about the UK specifically? What does the report for the UK specifically means? Is the UK on track of its ambitious goals?
There are several points you've raised there. Firstly, every tenth of a degree of warming, every extra ton of carbon dioxide emitted will simply make the future situation worse. So although the truth of the matter is that there is no black and white line, beyond which the climate change is going to be completely uncontrollable. Nevertheless, we are very concerned. We climate scientists are very concerned that there are thresholds and tipping points in the system which, once crossed, cannot be reversed. And we're very concerned that the melting of the ice sheets, the loss of the Amazon rainforest, the slowing down and perhaps significant change of the Gulf Stream, or the permafrost release of carbon, all of these thresholds are extremely worrying because at present we still have our hand on the control knob. We can still rapidly turn down CO2 and methane and other greenhouse gases and have some control over where the climate system will go in the future. If we leave it much longer, those thresholds will be crossed. They can have a cascade effect like falling dominoes. And at that point, we're left with the climate system essentially deciding itself on the basis of the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology, where it will end up. And what we've seen is with the relatively modest warming that we've had so far of 1.1 degrees, a warming of 3 to 5 degrees would just be unimaginable, absolutely unimaginable, and devastating for humanity. And then you asked about the UK. It was a pioneer in terms of the politics by introducing in 2008 the Climate Change Act, which established this independent body, a scientific body, the Committee on Climate Change, which has an adaptation subcommittee. And of course, this body has been setting carbon targets, carbon trajectories for the UK. And the UK has done quite well, more by luck than judgment. The fact that the UK has kept within the early phases of the trajectory that it has been advised to be on to reduce its emissions has been much more to do with changes in industrial policy and the way the economy functions than any genuine driver on part of the environment. So the environment has benefited. But now we're reaching the point where some very, very hard decisions have to be made. And we know that the committee has advised the government that it is not on track to meet later carbon trajectory emissions targets. Also, I think the message from what we're seeing happen around us at this relatively modest warming of 1.1 degree is that we have made insufficient progress on resilience. I won't use the word adaptation, because what we're seeing is that you know, if your city has been burned to the ground, you can't adapt to that, but you can make society more resilient, first of all, by protecting those cities better than they are at present, but secondly, by having in place emergency measures that deal with the situation when it arises. So I think that the focus on resilience and let's call it in a very general sense, adaptation, needs to be raised. And this is something that governments all around the world need to address, the UK in particular.